Smurl haunting. The story is so terrifying, it has continued to haunt paranormal enthusiasts for decades. Imagine a normal suburban family living out their daily lives in a modest duplex in West Pittston, Pennsylvania, only to find themselves tormented by something they could not see or explain. What began as a peaceful existence soon spiraled into a nightmare that would consume the Smurl family for over a decade, leaving them physically, emotionally, and spiritually exhausted. Our story begins in 1973, when Jack and Janet Smurl, along with their young children, moved into a duplex on Chase Street in West Pittston. Jack's parents lived on one side of the house, while Jack, Janet, and their 4 children lived on the other. It was supposed to be an ideal living arrangement, a place where they could raise their family and be close to loved ones. The house itself wasn't new. It had been damaged in a flood in 1972, but Jack and Janet were handy, and they spent time and effort renovating their side of the duplex, hoping to create a comfortable home. For a while, things seemed normal. They were a hard-working family, grounded in their Catholic faith and looking forward to building a future. But in 1974, subtle but strange events began to disturb their peaceful existence. It started small, as most haunting stories do. Unexplained odors would fill the air. Jack and Janet reported smelling something rancid, a foul stench that would drift through the house and then vanish just as quickly as it came. At first, they assumed it was something mundane, maybe a dead animal trapped in the walls, or some old pipes causing the smell. But as they searched, they found no explanation. This was just the beginning of a long and terrifying ordeal. The strange odors were soon accompanied by unsettling sounds, knocking, scratching, and distant voices. Again, at first, they tried to find logical explanations. Maybe it was the house settling, or perhaps it was just the sounds of an old duplex. But the noises grew more intense, more deliberate, as though something or someone was trying to get their attention. As the activity in the house escalated, the Smurl family began to experience more tangible phenomena. Objects would move on their own, lights would flicker on and off, and appliances would suddenly malfunction. There were times when the television would burst into static or change channels on its own. Janet reported seeing the family dog lifted off the ground by an unseen force. Furniture would shift out of place, and strange shadows began to appear in the corners of their vision, disappearing when they turned to look directly at them. By this point, Jack and Janet were growing increasingly uneasy, but they tried to remain rational. Maybe it was just their minds playing tricks on them, they thought. Maybe they were just tired, overworked and stressed with raising 4 children. But deep down, they both felt that something far more sinister was at play. It wasn't long before the activity became more personal. Janet, in particular, felt targeted by whatever was haunting their home. She reported feeling a heavy presence watching her, following her through the house. There were times when she felt as though something was breathing down her neck or brushing against her skin. Jack, too, experienced strange sensations, cold spots in the air, sudden drafts, and a feeling of overwhelming dread that would come and go without warning. The entire family was on edge, but they did their best to carry on with their daily lives, hoping that the disturbances would eventually stop. However, things only grew worse. In 1977, the activity in the Smurl home escalated to a terrifying new level. Loud banging noises would erupt in the middle of the night, jolting the family awake. They described it as though someone was pounding on the walls with a hammer, but when they investigated, there was no one there. At other times, they heard what sounded like human voices, muffled, indistinct, but unmistakably there. These voices seemed to come from within the walls themselves. Jack and Janet became increasingly frightened, realizing that they were no longer dealing with harmless pranks or simple noises. Whatever was in their home had become malevolent. As time went on, the entity or entities became more aggressive. Janet and her daughters claimed to have seen dark, shadowy figures moving through the house. These apparitions would appear briefly before vanishing into thin air. Janet described one figure as having no distinguishable features, just a black, human-shaped mass that radiated an overwhelming sense of evil. The family's teenage daughters, Dawn and Heather, were also affected. They would hear strange whispers in their rooms at night, voices calling their names, and sometimes even feel something pulling at their blankets while they slept. By 1985, the situation had grown unbearable. Jack and Janet began to experience physical attacks. Jack, in particular, reported being grabbed and scratched by an unseen force. He would wake up with deep gashes on his body, unable to explain how they got there. Janet, too, experienced disturbing physical sensations. She claimed to have been pushed by an invisible entity. These assaults were terrifying and deeply traumatizing for the family, pushing them to the brink of despair. The Smurls were devout Catholics, and their faith was shaken by the sheer malevolence of the forces they believed were at work in their home. Desperate for help, the Smurls turned to their local priest, Father Robert McKenna. He visited the home, blessed it, and performed religious rites to try and rid the house of whatever was tormenting them. But despite his efforts, the activity continued. In fact, it seemed to intensify after the blessing, as though the entity was angered by their attempts to expel it. The family knew they needed more help, someone who specialized in dealing with the supernatural. That's when they reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren. Ed and Lorraine Warren were well-known paranormal investigators, having worked on numerous high-profile cases, including the infamous Amityville horror. They believed in the existence of demonic forces and had made a career out of helping families tormented by the paranormal. When they arrived at the Smurl home, they immediately sensed the presence of something evil. According to Lorraine, who was a clairvoyant, she felt a dark, oppressive energy in the house. A demonic entity that had latched onto the Smurl family and was feeding off their fear and distress. Ed Warren, who was a demonologist, also believed that they were dealing with a malevolent spirit, possibly even more than one. The Warrens conducted several investigations into the Smurl haunting. They recorded audio and video evidence of the activity in the house, including disembodied voices, unexplained sounds, and shadowy figures. Lorraine claimed that she had seen the dark entity with her own eyes, an inhuman figure with glowing red eyes. The Warrens concluded that the Smurl family was being targeted by a powerful demonic force. Ed Warren believed that the entity had been drawn to the house because of the negative energy that had built up over the years, particularly following the flood damage in 1972. He theorized that the entity had attached itself to the family and was slowly wearing them down, both physically and mentally. With the Warrens' help, the Smurl family continued to fight back against the haunting. They invited several priests to perform exorcisms in the home, hoping to drive the entity away once and for all. But the exorcisms were unsuccessful. Each time the activity would die down for a short while, only to return even stronger. The Smurls were at their wits' end. They considered moving, but financial constraints made it impossible for them to leave the house. They were trapped in a nightmare, and it seemed as though there was no escape. In 1986, after years of torment, the Smurl haunting gained national attention when the family's story was covered by the media. Newspapers, television shows, and paranormal researchers all took an interest in the case. Some believed the Smurls' claims and sympathized with their plight, while others were skeptical, accusing the family of fabricating the story for attention or financial gain. The increased media attention brought even more stress to the Smurl family, who were already struggling to cope with the ongoing haunting. Despite the public scrutiny, the Smurl family maintained that their experiences were real. They described the toll the haunting had taken on their lives, how it had strained their relationships, affected their health, and shaken their faith. Jack, in particular, spoke about how powerless he felt as a father and husband, unable to protect his family from the unseen force that was terrorizing them. Janet, too, was emotionally drained, struggling to keep her family together while enduring the constant fear of the next attack. By 1987, after more than a decade of living in fear, the Smurl family finally decided to leave the house. They moved to a new home, hoping that the entity would not follow them. To their relief, the activity seemed to stop after they left Chase Street. The Smurls later claimed that they were able to rebuild their lives, though they were forever changed by the ordeal. But while the haunting may have ended for the Smurl family, the questions surrounding it remained. Skeptics have long questioned the validity of the Smurl haunting. Some believe that the family's experiences were the result of natural explanations, old pipes, faulty wiring, and the power of suggestion. Others have pointed to the psychological toll of living in a damaged, cramped home, suggesting that the stress and fear could have contributed to the family's belief that they were being haunted. The Warrens, of course, stood by their assessment that the Smurl family had been targeted by a demonic force, and many paranormal investigators agree with their conclusions. In 1991, the Smurl haunting was adapted into a made-for-TV movie titled The Haunted, which dramatized the family's experiences. The film further solidified the haunting's place in popular culture, though it also sparked additional skepticism. Some critics accused the movie of sensationalizing the events and exaggerating the level of paranormal activity in the house. But for the Smurl family, the haunting was all too real. They had lived through years of terror, and no amount of skepticism could erase the pain and trauma they had endured. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. More mysteries coming soon.